When people think of caregiving for seniors, they think of helping them with the activities of daily life, such as getting dressed and using the bathroom. But caregiving can be as simple as spending time with a senior, cooking a meal to enjoy together, or playing a board game with them. Such human interaction can help them to live independently and even help them to live longer, more enjoyable lives. As managing editor of the Senior List, Ryan Molloy researches and writes about senior caregiving, but also walks the walk. He's helped care for seniors from his own family to complete strangers and has a lot to say on the subject. Because Ryan is in Rhode Island and I'm in California, we talked about caregiving over Zoom. Hey everyone, it's Jeff Hoyt, editor-in-chief of SeniorLiving.Org. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Ryan Molloy. Ryan is the managing editor of the SeniorList.com, and the Senior List focuses on caregiving. Welcome, Ryan. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. Long time no see.
Indeed. So let's talk about caregiving in general and senior caregiving in particular, which is what you focus on. Why exactly is the art of senior caregiving so important?
Yeah, sure. So really, not to be corny, a little bit cheesy here, but really caregiving is the ultimate act of compassion. I know, especially in contemporary American society, it's pretty stressful. A lot of things seem dire and at their breaking point. And caregiving is probably the best way to make a difference. One of the best ways to make a difference in your community. I know particularly a lot of young people feel a little bit hopeless about the future. And I'm a big fan of think globally, act locally. And one of the best ways to help people in your community is to directly help them through caregiving, whether it's a family member, an acquaintance, or someone you find through an organization.
So senior caregiving encompasses a lot, whether it's as simple as helping a neighbor with their grocery shopping or other chores, to taking care of a aging family member inside the home. But it's all part of compassion and kindness.
Yeah, I would say all of them are equally important in a way. And you'd be surprised how many people, they don't need help with their activities of daily living, like the transfer, dressing, toileting. They don't even need help with that. They literally just need or want company, maybe someone to cook them a meal every now and then. And that's arguably of equal importance to, say, a CNA who can perform basic medical functions on a person.
There's some seniors who can't complete all their activities of daily life. They have to move into senior housing, and that can be so traumatic, leaving the only home that they know for a strange new place at an advanced age. But you're saying that just by helping a senior with some simple things like shoveling the walk on a snowy day or cooking a meal, like you said, that could help them maintain their independence and live in their own home.
When you get older, and in order to live on your own, you need to be able to cook yourself food. You need to be able to upkeep your house a little bit, in addition to all those basic activities of daily living, like toileting, et cetera. And a lot of people, as they get older, those things become harder. Maybe some days they can do them, but other days they can't. And so if they have one person in their community, or maybe even a team of people, which is always great if you have siblings around to help you, if the case of your parents, that can make all the difference in allowing them to still live independently. And I think the last time I checked the research, last time there was a big significant poll about this, 89% of people, as you might expect, would prefer to age in their house rather than move to an assisted living, independent living, any type of senior housing.
I'd like to beat that 11%. Can't wait to get the heck out of there.
I mean, if you look at some of those retirement communities in Florida, they look pretty fun in a way.
Just to be clear, you don't just write about caregiving. You actually have experience working with caregiving organizations.
So I consider myself a part-time caregiver, full-time writer. So yeah, I have a pretty good amount of experience caring for people. I don't even have any sort of certification though, obviously basic first aid, but most of my caregiving is just personal companion care.
And you actually spent some time with a group called Papa Pals?
I'm originally from New England, and back here I have some aging grandparents, and so I spent a lot of time caring for them. But then I lived out in Las Vegas for a little bit of time and wanted to kind of get back in the swing of caregiving. And I found this new app called Papa Pals. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I've heard of Papa Pals.
So Papa Pals is often called the Uber of home care. And I've spoken with some representatives from Papa. They prefer not to be called the Uber of home care, but I think it helps to contextualize how the company works. Essentially, it's something obtained through either private health plans or Medicare Advantage plans. And Papa essentially allows the policyholder to book caregivers almost on demand. You can do it like a day, even a few hours before. And so I was one of the pals in Papa Pals providing care to people in the region.
I'd imagine there's a world of difference between caring for a loved one and caring for a person you just met.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a different vibe, and it almost feels like walking in on a first date or something, you know? You walk into this stranger's house and you really don't have much of an expectation of what they need. Um, in my case, I spoke to them on the phone beforehand, so I knew a little bit what to expect. Like, oh, we'll probably play some board games. I'll do some light cleaning, but otherwise, you kind of don't know what you're walking into, and so you just kind of feel it out. The one thing about Papa is this might have changed, but when I was with them, they did not do any sort of skilled caregiving. You know, like you need credentials to be able to, say, safely toilet a person or safely transfer them from bed to another location. So my caregiving was strictly companionship and some light chores.
What's interesting is that, like, if you help a friend move or pick them up at the airport, they're going to thank you so profusely for helping them out. But when it comes to caregiving, like most of mine is childcare, um, you don't get a whole lot of thank yous. I can't speak. You know, when you're changing diapers, or, feeding them, warming up a bottle, it's like there's no. You're just, you're doing a good job, and you're not getting it. I'm sure with some seniors as well, it's the same thing that you may they could be having a bad day, and you may not feel appreciated by that you're giving your time and energy to them. Has that ever happened to you?
Not so much for me, but I've definitely heard of a lot of people not feeling appreciated in their efforts. Ironically enough, happens a lot with people who are caring for aging family members, I find. And I feel like that's a result of, not only are you providing care to a person who's in maybe dire medical straits, but also while providing care, you have to confront maybe years of past grievances while you're performing care. Um, but that's why, regardless of the situation, I feel like it's always good to network with other caregivers. And when I say network, it makes it sound like a work event, but literally in almost any location, there's got to be some sort of group that meets either digitally or in person of just caregivers who kind of cope with the various challenges they're facing, share techniques, etc. That stuff I find is really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Plus, if you have a bad day, you can always go on Facebook and vent, and there'll be a group of people who'll pat you on the back and support you and make you feel better.
Exactly. It's all about venting properly.
So I mentioned most of my caregiving experiences with children, and that role seems to be appreciated by society, while caregiving for seniors seems to be treated differently. Why is it that society doesn't hold caregiving for seniors in such high regard?
Not to be annoying, I would kind of disagree with the premise of this question. Um, I feel like senior care is held in high regard, but sort of like school teachers and garbage men, even though they're essential roles to a functioning society, they're just not paid much. So a lot of people don't want to do it, and they'd rather do other endeavors.
Okay, let's leave high regard aside and just talk about the economics of the situation. Um, School teachers make $40,000 a year, and guys who hit home runs make 40 million a year. So society puts a price tag on the things it values most. So why do you think it's such a low price tag taking care of our nation's elderly?
Again, I'm not too much of a professional in the economics of it, but I would imagine it has to do with the fact that literally anyone could be a caregiver, which is not to say that it's not difficult or valuable work, but anyone, any able-bodied person could provide care to another person. Um, I think that's maybe why the work is devalued financially a little bit.
And then you mentioned when you're caring for someone through an organization like Papa Pals, you don't have the old grievances, the old wounds, uh, the years of a relationship that you have when you're dealing with taking care of a senior family member. So in that regard, I guess it's more of a clean slate to work with somebody that you really don't know, as opposed to someone where you have a long family history.
Yeah, definitely. It's very touch and go in that way. Meet a new person, find out what board games or television programs they like, and then kind of hang out for a bit.
And it's like you said, even though you don't need years of education or training to go to someone's house and do them a solid, it can be so appreciated, especially if a senior doesn't get out much. Let's say the weather's bad, they don't have a car, that they're not having much human interaction. Just going to their house, eating up some tea or a meal, sitting down for a game of Monopoly, Parcheesi, uh, card games, whatever, teaching them a game on your phone, things like that can be so appreciated.
Exactly. You can't underestimate how valuable your time might be to someone else, depending on what they're going through. Just a little bit of company really goes a long way.
So you mentioned before about acting locally. Let's think globally for a second, because this country is heading towards a day when there are going to be more seniors over 65 than kids 18 and under. So, what can society do to prepare itself for that day that could be a decade away?
That's a really big question. um, so again, I'm going to preface, I'm not an economist. I am not a politician, so I don't really know the entire nitty gritty of what needs to go into these things. But right off the bat, I feel like I see all the time reports of how Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are going to go under within the next few decades. If those things did not go under and possibly expanded, I feel like that would be great to meeting the needs of an aging population. Um, and also, this isn't something that I feel needs to change, but I think will change. I think we're going to see a lot more people embracing intergenerational housing. When I last checked, the rates were like under a quarter of families live in intergenerational housing. And I think that's going to change, and rates of that are going to go way up. I know in my family, we're starting to embrace that kind of lifestyle with aging grandparents. And I can't help but think of the millennial generation. So maybe this is even further than when the population is aging as it currently is. But my generation can't even buy a house or pay off our student loans. So how are we going to pay $7,000 or whatever it costs at that point, $7,000 a month for assisted living? We're not going to. So I think there's going to be a lot more reliance back on communities to take care of themselves as opposed to outsourcing it to care communities.
Speaking locally, where I live in Los Angeles, the government's made it a lot easier to build an additional housing unit or two in your backyard if you own a home. So some neighbors of mine have built units and had their parents move in, additional family members moving in. So that's one form of the multi-generational housing that you mentioned. And where that's not possible or feasible, just having kids move into their parents' house becomes sort of a trade-off where the kids get a home to live in and the parents get the caregivers they need. So it's kind of a win-win that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I know one of my grandmothers right now is in assisted living, and she hates that her life savings is now being slowly whittled away by the assisted living community she lives in. And I know a lot of people would like to prevent that, and maybe would, if the options available, like to live with their children. But then again, to bring it back to the millennial generation, people aren't having kids as much. So who knows what multi-generational housing will look like in those circumstances.
Well, maybe it means 3, even 4 grandparents and only 1 kid to take care of them all.
Yeah, multi-generational just means I'll go move in with my parents.
So how can people learn more about caregiving in general and senior caregiving in particular?
I would recommend definitely trying to find a local caregiving group in your community. There might be specific ones based on people who are caring for those with Alzheimer's, but a great place to start, I would say, would be Facebook if you have that, or your local classifieds, because almost every community has some type of caregiver group, maybe even specific ones for specific conditions. Those are a great place to learn techniques. Also, if you listen to podcasts, there's a few that I really like, but one I'm into right now is called Daughterhood, the podcast. It's all about this woman, Roseanne Corcoran, caring for her mother with Alzheimer's, and she has a bunch of other experts come on. It's important to remember, especially if it's family, caregiving is more than just the logistics of providing the care itself. It's also helping your parent navigate legal concerns, health insurance concerns, and just health concerns naturally. So anytime you hear advice from other people about that, I think that's really helpful. And lastly, I feel like you should check out my website, theseniorlist.com, particularly theseniorlist.com/caregiving, where we have a hub with a lot of financial content, practical caregiving tips, and just all around advice about starting the process and getting financial aid for it.
Really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, Ryan. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Jeff.